All right, welcome to level 3 of this video series where we are learning how to build an API. And in this level, we will be creating and using a real database. Until now, we have only had all our books and all the data in memory of the server. And of course, that's not as cool as actually having a persistent database. And we will be using a postgreSQL database. And there are many ways to get such a thing up and running. You could use a Docker container to run it. You could also install it locally on your machine to get it running. But in this guide, I will be using an online version so that you don't have to install anything. You don't have the hassle of installing Docker or installing Postgres on your machine. Instead, you just use this free online service that has a free tier that allows you to test out their services, which is perfect for a learning project like this. So before we start with the online service and all that stuff, let's first install the dependency that we're going to need locally. So we are going to need a tool called PG, which will allow us to connect our Express or our Node environment to a Postgres service. So we'll do an npm I and for install, and then -- save, and then PG, like this. And this should now install this Postgres package. And we also need the types for that. And I'll just save them as development dependencies because we don't need them in production. They're only useful for our development. So we do add types /pg like this. So save dev and then add types /pg. And let's have a look at our package.json, where we should now see that we have the PG and the types. Perfect. So the next thing that I want to do is to create a new class in our project that will handle the whole connection to the database. So of course we could just put the logic and put all the code into our API logic here. We could handle everything here and connect to the database, retrieve all the stuff we need and handle everything here. But if we do that, then this file and all this code will be very cluttered and it will just be very bloated. There will be a lot of things happening in one file, and I don't want that. I want to separate. I want to have separation of concerns, which means that I want each small part of my code to do exactly one thing and only do that one thing. So that's why we're going to make a small service class that will take care of this database connection. So I open up my terminal and I do touch source, and then I would like to make a db service .ts. So this will be a database service. And next I will open up this file, and in here let's now define a class that will take care of all this database logic. So I will make a class and I will call this db service and do like this. And this db service now needs to have a connection to the Postgres. And the way we do it is by using this PG package that we just installed. So we can create something that we'll call a pool and set this equal to a new pool with capital letters. And this pool comes from the PG package, as you can see over here. So if I press enter, we now import it up in the top. And this pool now needs to take a configuration. And this configuration includes the details about how to connect to our database. And we will get that in a second once we set up the database in our online service. So right now it's complaining that pool is not yet used, but it will be very soon. So let's go ahead and set up our an account online where we're going to have our database online. So I'm gonna jump over to a browser. And in this browser here, you can see I have just searched for this Neon Tech because we're going to use Neon's service. So if you click on this and you jump in here, as you can see, they are advertising that you can start up for free. You just sign up, and I just signed up with my Google account, and then I press on start free. And this will then take you to your projects page. And if this is a completely new account, you don't have a project yet, this will then ask you to create your first project. Let me just see if I can zoom in. So first off, you can give your project a name. I will just call this the bookshelf API. And I would like to use Postgres version 16. I just want the newest. And then a name for my database. And this database, I'll just call it bookshelf database, like this. And then you can choose a region, and this is where this server or this technology that they're hosting, where will it physically be in the world? And you should choose something that's closest to you. I think I am closest to Singapore right now, maybe Frankfurt. So I'll choose the Frankfurt version. And then I click create. And then you are greeted with this, which is the connection details for your project. And actually, this is all you need for now. So you can copy this by clicking on the small icon down here and copy this string. And this string is a connection string, which includes all the details needed in order to connect to your database. So when you have copied this string, you can go back over here to our pool, and inside of this object that we are instantiating this pool object with, we can then do connection string and set this equal to a string where we put in the whole string that we just copied. And let's just go through how this string works slowly. Let me just have some more space. So first off, you specify that this is a PostgreSQL connection. Then you specify what the database is called. Bookshelf. No, sorry. This is the user of the database. And because we're using this Neon tech, they automatically create a user that is called the name of the database _ owner. So this will be the owner user of this database. Next, you have the password after the colon. So this is the username. This is the password. And next, and after that, you then have the @ sign, and then you have the URL to this specific connection or to the database. So this is the host. This is where we will connect to. So we're going to connect to the PostgreSQL that is situated behind this URL, and we will log in with this user using this password. And this is the name of the database that we're going to connect to. And then this is just to make sure that we are signing in using a secure connection. All right. So now that we have that up and running, we should actually be able to connect to the database. But if we start doing that, we'll find out that we don't have a table yet. So this means that we have a database, but no table. So nowhere to store the data in the database. So let's just go ahead and create a table as the next thing. So we go back over here and we close down the small modal, and then let's open up our tables view down here. And as you can see, in the database of whatever your name was, in the public schema, you have no tables. Tables 0 currently. So let's jump into the SQL editor and delete everything that we have here, because I'm going to give you a command that you can fire off to create your table. And of course, you're going to need to learn how to use SQL. And this is a very good opportunity for you to jump in and study some more SQL. Because remember, in this tutorial series that I give you here, I just want to give you enough to get you started. And then you should always expand your knowledge by yourself. You should go out and explore in each level. After each video, you should explore the topic that the video has covered so that you get a further understanding. Because overall, in the end, that is the goal of all this. It is that you get better and that you learn something, you get the experience. So in order to create a table, I will just grab my commands. I have already created this file with some commands that I prepared, and this is to create the database. We already have that, so we don't need the first one, but we would like to have this command. And let's just have a look at what it does. It creates a table called book, and this book will have a column with an ID, and this ID will be serial. This means that every time we insert a new book, it will increment the ID by 1. Also, this will be the primary key. And again, these are some technical words that are very specific to relational databases, and you should go ahead and learn more about it. But that is not the focus of this whole video, so I will not go deeper into it. Next, we have a title for the book, and this will be a text, and it cannot be null. This means that this has to be present. The same thing for the author, and the published will be a Boolean, and also this cannot be null. So that is the setup for our table. If we run this command, we should now see that it has completed and we have a small history here where we can see what we have previously run into this editor. This means that now if we go back to tables and we take a look at the book, we currently have a book table, but there's nothing inside of it. So we first need to insert something. So let's jump back to the code and add a function that will allow us to insert a book into this table. Over here in the code, I will now create a function that will be public, because we want our server that is going to use this class to be able to call this function. So we make a public function called insert book, and this will take a book as input. This is the stuff that it will put into the database. So it of course needs an input, and this will be an object with a title that's a string. It will be an author that is also a string, and it will be the published, if I can just hit the right letters, and this will be a boolean. And this function is then going to return a promise, because it's going to be an asynchronous function, and this promise will just be void, like this, and curly brackets. And let's return like this. So the next thing that we need to do is to use this pool, the pool property that we have up here. And the way that we do it is by calling this dot pool, and then on the pool we have this query function. And in the query function we can specify the SQL that we would like to execute, and we can also put in some variables that we would like to input into the SQL. So the way we do it is that we first of all grab this insert statement that I have already created, and we put this in quotes and put it in here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to insert into the book table a title, author, and published, and the values will be will come from the variables that we'll specify in just a second. And the way we do it is by putting a comma, and then as a second parameter we can now have an array of values, and these values will then be the book.title, the book.author, and finally for the published value will of course be the book.published. And then we get an error saying that we cannot put a boolean in here. So instead of just having the boolean, we'll typecast this into a string and have this wrapped inside this parentheses, and now it should be happy. So now we're going to this will fire off or execute this insert statement and put these three values into the title, author, and published. And of course this is going to be an asynchronous call, because contacting this database that is on a different computer in a different country most likely is of course going to take some time. So we need to make this asynchronous. So we also have to await for this. And in order to do that, we of course need to make this function an asynchronous function. Yes, so all this looks good. Let's just have a look at what is wrong with the pool. Of course, it's because I used the const keyword here. We cannot do that inside of the class. The properties are not specified with the let or const keyword. Instead, I would like to annotate this as private. So this pool can only be accessed from within this class. All right, so now that we have this set up, let's just export this export default, and then let's create a new instance of this database service. And by doing this, when we export it like this, we kind of make a singleton and make sure that this class is only instantiated once, and it will be the only connection that we have to the database. We'll go through this service. If we then jump back to our server.ts file and have a look at the, let me just fold, I'll just collapse all these, all of these functions, fold level 1 like this. This will give us a better overview, and let's find the post. So now in the post route, instead of using the books that were hard-coded into this one, I would instead like to use our new database service. So the way that we do it is by, first of all, putting in here that we want the DB service, and when I click enter, I have now imported it from above here. I import the DB service, and I can then call this insert book function, and this function, of course, needs the book as an input parameter. So we put in the new book that we defined just above. And this is an asynchronous function. So we have to await for this. So I type await. But in order to do this, this of course has to be an asynchronous function. So I put the async keyword up here. So now we're able to wait for the book, and hopefully this all goes well and we don't push this book. And then in the end, we'll just return the books. This of course does not make sense any longer because these books are the hard-coded books from up here, but the real books that we want to return are actually the books coming from the database. So let's just also create an endpoint that can retrieve all the books. So if we go back to the DB service and let's just copy this function above, and we'll call this get books. And this one does not require any input parameters. And instead of returning a void promise, we will instead like to return an array of books. So the way we can do that is by typing book and then square brackets to signify that it's an array of books. And of course, this book type does not exist yet. So I will just define it up here outside of the class. So I'll do an export of type, and it's a book. And this book will just say has this format. We can steal it from down here without these, like this. Yes, and let's just format this. And we need equal sign. All right, so now we have defined this type, which is a book, and we can use this throughout the throughout our code down here. And as well, we can use it down here for the input of the insert statement. So this is a little more clean. And of course, in this function, we don't want to insert anything. We just want to retrieve everything. So if we jump over to our commands.sql, I have a small SQL statement here that will grab everything that we need. So let me just clean this up like this. So what this does is that it will grab everything. The star or the wildcard symbol means grab everything from the table called book. So we'll just get everything that we have in the book table. And then we don't need this second parameter, this array of stuff. So let's just remove that. And let's save this in a variable. So we can do const books and assign this to the result that comes back from here. And then we would like to return all of these books. But this will not just be the books. This will actually be a query result, which is a special object that will include the books. So to get them, we'll have to get the rows instead. So we return the books and then we return each row from this query result. Actually, we could also call this result. And what we return is actually the result, the rows on the result, sorry. And if we then jump back to server.ts, let's insert the book, and afterwards let's grab all the books again, just so that we're able to display to the client that we actually have some books in there. So let's do all books variable, and this will be dbservice.getBooks. And of course we have to await this one as well. And finally, let's return all these books. So this should now be ready. Let's check if our database, or not our database, our server is running. We have everything running here and here. Good. And then we also have our connection string over here. This means that we should now be connecting to the database when this class is instantiated, which it is immediately when we import it. So everything should be ready now. And if we jump over to our postman and now try to post a book, let's give that a try. We have our find book here, and we click send. This will take a little bit longer than normal because we actually have to make a connection to an external database. But we get a 201 created status, and we get back an array that includes all the books. And as you can see, we also have this extra parameter called ID, and this was automatically put onto the book object in the table, because that's how we specified the rules for that table. If we jump into the browser and have a look at the books tables, let me just refresh this. then we should also see that we have now one book in our database. And in this table, as you can see, we have an ID, we have the book and an author. Perfect. Also, if we just try to get everything with the get all endpoint, if we do that, then we actually get both of these. And that's because, of course, I have forgotten to change this endpoint. So instead of getting these books, we should instead const books, get them from the DB service. So we'll do DB service.getBooks, and we will await the result and make this asynchronous. And finally, we will return books.rows like this. And what have we forgotten? Await, get books, return books. Sorry, this is the wrong place to do the books.rows. This function, of course, I just tricked myself. This DB service is of course responsible for getting the books, and get books will return an array of books, which is actually what we want. So we already have everything we need in this books. So let's give it a try. If we go back to Postman, send a request, and now we should see that we only have one book coming from the actual database. And it's taking a while. I'm not sure why it's taking so long, but let's just give it a second more. Let's have a look in the logs of the server. Nothing looks wrong here. Of course, it's because this is not return. We don't want to return. Instead, we want to do rest.json. Sorry, my bad. So we do rest.json. And of course, this restarted the server, which means we lost the connection. But now if we do a send, we should now actually get the response. Yes, and here we go. We have that one book that was in the database.